tough times require angry Jesus. Fire and brimstone Jesus.
Yeah,
not like,
sure.
sort of.
Well, the
be kind
president
to your
isn't
neighbor
Jesus, right? So
No, clearly. Hi everybody, I'm Ian Bremmer, and welcome to your GZero world. I'm here in Manhattan, just back from the Middle East. I'm going to talk to you in a little bit about that big election in Alabama, what's going on in Iraq, defeating ISIS, and Venezuela, where the opposition is increasingly no more. We've got your puppet regime, where President Trump makes his singing debut on GZero, and also for your big interview, Charlie Spiering from Breitbart News. He is the senior White House correspondent. Going to talk about draining the swamp, whether we can handle all that winning, and everything else that's on his mind. But first, your world this week. To Alabama with a big Senate race. It is Roy Moore losing despite support from President Trump in a massively Republican state to Doug Jones, now going to be a seated Democrat. Look, I was in the Middle East when this all went down. It's the first time in my life I was ever asked there about Alabama, so you know something strange. My perspective looking at it from the outside, it reminded me of France. Not something to celebrate, but rather a really big bullet that was just dodged. Those French elections, Macron almost didn't make the second round. You would have had the Communists and the National Front, then we'd have a very different story. Here you have one of the least fit candidates that you have seen running for a Senate office in decades in Roy Moore, and he almost won. It was about 20,000 vote differential. That would have been a very big problem for Alabama, for the Republicans, for the country. Didn't happen. Going forward, one of the things to pay attention to, less about the midterms than it is about the GOP sticking with their candidates and sticking with the president. Once Trump got in, there was nothing the Republican Party could do but provide monetary support for someone that they thought was badly damaged because they didn't want to go against the president. All of those Trump supporters in Alabama, they voted with Roy Moore. That's the way it's going to be across the country. In Iraq, they finally have a holiday worth celebrating. December 10 is the defeat of the ISIS Caliphate. And it's really been done. Mosul and other towns that they were occupying, they're gone. The Iraqis didn't even have a functioning military that was going to fight them a few years ago. Now they do. They've won. Even opponents to Prime Minister Abadi thinks he's done a pretty good job in making that happen. That's going to provide a little bit more stability in that country. They don't have the money for actually rebuilding. It's probably over $150 billion. No one has that kind of coin. Massive human rights concerns still occurring. But for Iraq itself, you should be seeing an economic pickup. You should be seeing much less human rights concerns, at least for the coming year or two. One other thing I'd focus on, though, is where do all those ISIS fighters go? Because, of course, they haven't all been killed. Some are underground. A lot went back to their countries of origin. South Asia, Southeast Asia, one place we've seen much more pickup in radical Islamic terrorism over the past months. That will continue. And don't forget that Port Authority attack in New York City, that was a Bengali immigrant. I suspect that's a community we're going to be paying more attention to going forward. And in Venezuela, Maduro continues to consolidate power, winning big in local elections, and most of the opposition did not participate because they knew it was going to be stolen. He's now saying in upcoming presidential elections that need to be held by the end of 2018 that all those opposition parties can't run, which allows Maduro to push up the presidential election, what people thought was going to force him out after his first term, which was a disaster. No, now he gets to have a disastrous second term. If you want to be in opposition in Venezuela right now, you might as well form one in exile like the former Syrian rebels did. That's about the only way you have a shot of winning. Massive refugees continuing to stream away from the border and the economy only getting worse. There's no one but Maduro at this point. Kind of the horrible thing, the Americans telling the Chinese stop giving oil to North Korea. Nobody talking to the Americans about not buying any oil from the Venezuelans anymore because it cost us an extra penny at the pump. But instead, we are providing money that's helping to prop up one of the most repressive regimes in the world. Don't forget that next time you put some gas in your car. Those are your stories around the world this week. And now President Trump comes to my studio, brings his guitar for a family-friendly, sorta, song for the children. puppet regime. Ian Bremmer here with the President of the United States, Mr. Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump, you are probably the most outspoken president in American history. But is there anything that you feel that you don't get the chance to talk about as much as you'd like?
Well, as you know, Ian, I care deeply about children. Beautiful, beautiful children. And about education. You may recall my IQ battle with Rex Tillerson, which of course I won. And so I wrote a song, actually, to help kids learn the most important parts of the alphabet. I brought this guitar. Do you mind? May I? Do you mind?
Wow. Well, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, first on GZero World, a musical interlude from the President of the United States.
Is for the great, great anger that everyone's talking about. B's a beautiful border wall to keep the brown kids out. C is for the Chinese breaking all the rules. D, boss is gonna defund all of your little schools. E is for the experts who predicted that I'd lose. F I'd put right next to you, but let's just call it fake news. G is great, H is healthcare, which I swear we're gonna get rid of. But in the end, what's the only letter that I never get sick of? It's I, the greatest you'll ever see. I, a letter invented by me. I, the point of ABC. What other letters do you really need? I. Estoy hablando español. No, my friend, nice try. I'm just saying I.
But Donald, this song is just about you.
No. You comes later. Don't you be such a hater. This is the ABC of me.
Puppet regime. Kind of enjoying it, you know. Yeah. I mean, for now, honestly, we only started this 3 months ago. We're here on top of a roof in Washington, D.C., and protests going on in the background. It feels kind of exciting nation's capital evening. And I'm here with Charlie Spiering, who is the senior White House correspondent at Breitbart News. We're going to talk about draining the swamp and all sorts of other things, Charlie. So I'm going to ask you just a couple quick questions, White House correspondent. So, I am kind of interested as young, fresh-faced guy from Breitbart in the White House press scrum. And the mainstream media is getting, beaten the crap out of on a daily basis by Trump, who clearly can't stand them, but finds them enabling, right? How do those guys treat you? What's your relationship like with the press?
So I started covering the White House for Breitbart during the Obama years,
and you were roundly ignored.
No, actually, I got some good questions from Josh Earnest. To his credit, he rewarded me for showing up, and sitting in the seats and raising my hand. So
you seemed surprised with the first time they asked you a question.
Yeah,
though.
No, I was baffled. I turned and I looked behind me and I was like, "Who are you pointing at?" Because he didn't know my name. He's just like, "You sitting there," and I was like, "Obviously not me," but it was. So yeah, I had a great relationship with my colleagues. I was a little surprised at how they changed a little bit with the dawn of the Trump administration.
In what way?
A little more combative. It's personal to them, and they take it. It seemed like they take it a little too seriously. They don't realize that the president. Maybe they realize it, but they're very frustrated with his, daily banter on fake news and stuff.
So of the things that were really controversial in the mainstream media on these issues for Trump, and it's the NFL and it's Puerto Rico and it's Charlottesville and it's Roy Moore and others, right? Which of those do you think actually mainstream media got completely wrong? He was absolutely right to do this because they don't get it. He's beating up on those guys, and that's going to work. Where did you feel that?
Me personally, I think that, you go through politics for a certain amount of time, and that certainly didn't understand the Trump campaign, the Trump movement quite as well, because a lot of the things were shocking to hear. Some of the things he said about McCain and others, it just, but it seems like it took on more of a, and this is what Bannon described as like the WWE mentality.
The world
mainstream
wrestling.
media is sort of this fake combat.
And the most popular tweet that Trump has had was depicting CNN as fake news when he pile drived him,
Really?
right? All year. It absolutely was number one.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Didn't hit Obama numbers,
Right.
but still, it was
Right.
pretty good for Trump. So yeah.
Yeah. So for him to just engage in this combat, I think really not only entertains, but it makes these supporters of his understand that he's fighting for them. They feel the same way. They don't like to see. They don't. They were frustrated with a lot of the existing norms in politics and media, and they were just happy to see someone come crashing through it.
Now you grew up on a farm in Wyoming. What's blue collar patriotism to you?
It's the idea that America's the greatest country in the world. We have these Western values.
Western values. What are they?
So you look at the Judeo-Christian tradition, and you look at belief in God and the moral life, and how that the American character is what makes this country great.
We're going to talk about morality, right? And we talk about Christian ethics. I mean, obviously, when you start looking at how Trump tweets, how he treats people, the bullying, the name calling, that sort of thing. I mean, clearly, I was raised a Catholic. My mouth would have been washed out with soap for that sort of thing. You come from a Christian family. You would have gotten a backhand for that. Even for those of us that don't do corporal punishment, it's problematic. I mean, how does that work, right? How much is that, well, it's okay, he's a broken vessel, but he's our vessel. And how much of that is really actually damaging that blue-collar patriotism that wants someone that can lead by moral example?
You see it in a community of people who are more angry than before. And they see the president as a fighter. And this is who the president was when he was running for office. He was just gloves off, bare knuckles, just a fighter. Fighter for everyone who hated, or not maybe hated, or really frustrated with the establishment media, the establishment of Hollywood, the rise of political correctness. And I think they loved, when I traveled in Iowa and talked to Trump supporters, even early in the campaign, I'd be like, why do you like Trump? And because he tells it like it is, because, he's not politically correct. And it's just struck me universally, across the board. Maybe that's what they were telling media, but it just seemed like that was the main reason.
Tough times require angry Jesus. Fire and brimstone Jesus.
Yeah,
not like,
sure.
Sort of.
Well, the
be kind
president
to your neighbor
isn't Jesus, right? So
No, clearly.
Some sort of secular leader that can fight for you, right? That's the phrase that politicians use, and I think Trump was the first one that really embodied that. And certainly we had Hillary Clinton on the trail vowing to fight for us, but it just didn't feel like she was ever going to.
And was Obama unpatriotic in terms of Western values in your view?
Obama was funny because he would go overseas and he would talk about, he seemed more interested, and he seemed to be like a very intellectual professor type, right? Every time he went overseas, he seemed more interested in where he was rather than sort of talking about America overseas. And I was struck by the difference. Every time Trump went somewhere, it's so funny because he would sit there and talk about how great the American economy was, how great America was to do business in, and it seemed like he was always trying to sell America everywhere he went.
So when Trump goes to Japan and a golf course and he eats a hamburger, he is reflecting blue-collar patriotism.
Right, American values.
And Obama goes and has sushi, and maybe he makes the Japanese happy, but he's not doing anything for the American people when he does that, in your view.
I don't think it's that simple. I think a lot of Trump supporters were frustrated with Obama criticizing our country overseas. And he did a lot of that when he was traveling, and he would suggest that, we were to blame for some of the conflicts overseas. And this is where you get the whole Obama was apologizing for America every time he went overseas. I think a lot of that tone that he took is what created that frustration.
So we've talked a lot about Trump supporters and what they want. To what extent do you think that Trump has responsibility / obligation to those that don't support him?
Right, and this is sort of goes down to Trumpism. What is Trumpism? And if you talk to Steve Bannon, he'll say, the movement is bigger than Trump. It's this economic model. It's this economic nationalism, America First type movement. And we can look at the larger country and see that people of both parties are interested in this. It's not just, your typical conservative. It's your average American that has been raised with these values and wants to see them restored in the country. So as far as Breitbart's mission, we want to see the people who don't have a voice anymore in corporate mainstream media. We want to be their voice, and the whole give voice to the voiceless. And I think we did a lot of that in the campaign, and we certainly did a lot of that going forward in this administration.
So how do you, if you compare yourselves and how you think about Trump and worldview to Fox, right? What's different?
They're still very much issue of the day type people. And I think a lot of correspondents are that. This is the issue of the day. We're going to ask the necessary questions about the issues of the day. We'll certainly do a little of that, but try to look at it from our readers' eyes. And it's going to be a little bit different than the typical mainstream media.
Charlie Spiering, great to have you here. Look forward to seeing you again.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
That's the show this week. Going to be off for a couple of weeks. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be fighting the war on Christmas. Time to suit up, I think. But before then, if you want to check out some of our highlights from the most exciting episodes that we've been putting together, we'll have a little pre-Christmas present for you next week. Otherwise, have a great season and a happy new year, and I'll be with you real soon.
Perfect.
Good.
That's great.
Huh?